really matters? That might be the most important question you can ask. So let's talk about it. Welcome to What Really Matters podcast, Everyday Spirituality with Karen Wyatt. Thanks for joining me here today. In this episode, I'm going to talk about when things get worse before they get better. And I think we've probably all heard that statement that the darkest hour comes before dawn. I think there are quite a few different metaphors expressing that same universal truth in a way, that sometimes we go through the most difficult part of our journey right before some sort of a breakthrough occurs. And I've been reflecting on that this past week. If you listened to my episode last week, I talked a little bit about developing a case of shingles, which happened at the very same time as I released a podcast talking about my grief after my father's suicide death, and also during the week, which was the anniversary of my father's death. So it was a very powerful experience last week with recording that podcast and actually putting it out to the world. And it strikes me as not a coincidence that I developed shingles on the very day the podcast began to broadcast. So I have been thinking about this all week. And as I've been working on recovering from shingles and coping with the symptoms of the shingles, there's pain and itching, nerve pain, fatigue, and some other symptoms to deal with. But thinking about the meaning, the symbolism, the depths of importance in a way of acknowledging that an illness like this is not necessarily random, that it's connected in some way to what is happening for me emotionally. In my podcast about grief after my father's suicide death, I talked about how long I have really kept inside my pain over my dad's death, and even much of the story about his death. And I have not very often really talked the way I did in the podcast about my own experience, my journey through pain. And I have chosen to keep that quiet for most of my life. And yet I felt it was really important to be honest and to open it up and to share it with other people, recognizing that most likely other people were experiencing something similar. And yet here, after going through this very process of opening up this closed room of emotion that I have protected and kept hidden for such a long time, that I end up getting physically ill, because it seemed to me that releasing all of that would actually help me feel better, that I would be inspired, that I would feel renewed energy in a way after bringing all this out into the open. And yet, instead of that, I got sick with shingles. So again, I've been contemplating this all week and reading the selfcompassion.org website, which is where I go sometimes when I need a reminder to be gentle and kind to myself. And there was an admonition on the website that when you begin showing compassion and kindness to yourself, especially about old pain that has been hidden for a long time, it can cause the pain to get worse. And that was an aha moment for me, like, oh, like this is part of this journey of healing, that something could actually feel worse for a while when we're trying to make it better. And so they compared it to the idea of a backdraft during a fire. When a building is on fire, And a backdraft happens when a room that has been closed off, that doesn't have much ventilation, that has been developing a lot of heat, but has not had new oxygen coming in to feed the fire. When the door to that room is first open, it can ignite in flames that rush out of the room. It can be very dangerous for firefighters. Like a huge ball of flame can come shooting out of that room as oxygen begins to enter the room for the first time. So in a way, opening up something old that's been kind of kept without oxygen in the dark and hidden away in a closed room, when we open it up for the first time, even though we're exposing it to life-giving love and light, that we can have this backdraft phenomenon in a way where the exposure to love and light for all of that pain and emotion can make it feel as if there's an explosion all at once of flames as all of this emotion comes pouring out from that closed room, just like the backdraft of a fire. And that really resonated with me, and even literally, because my skin has been burning for the last week. This metaphor of a fire that came roaring out of the hidden room really matches what I've been experiencing. So I've decided that was something really important for us to acknowledge as we're on the healing journey, because it's entirely possible and maybe even likely, when we do go inside and when we do begin to explore some of our older wounds and older pain that we have kept inside for a very, very long time, it's possible that we will go through a backdraft experience, and that it may seem like everything's getting much worse. Like, gosh, why did I even start this process? Why did I even look at that? It made me sick. It made everything worse. But that this experience of things getting worse is part of the healing process, and it is part of releasing the toxins in a way that have been stored, that need to be out into the light and into the air so that they can be dissipated. So that has all made sense to me and has helped me understand what I'm experiencing. And I thought even further about the fact that whenever you have an illness that affects the skin and causes a rash on the skin, there's a certain amount of stigma attached to that in our society, a certain amount of embarrassment and shame, a feeling of, I need to hide this, I need to cover it up. And so I realized I'm like reenacting some of the stigma and shame that I felt around my dad's suicide death by having shingles, something that I'm also feeling stigmatized about and that I feel needs to be covered up and hidden. And I even feel embarrassed that I'm talking about it on this podcast. So I realize how deep these issues go. And I think not just for me, I think that is probably societal as well, because I've heard people with skin diseases, particularly chronic skin diseases, talk about their embarrassment and shame of being seen publicly, and the things that other people say to them, and the judgment that they feel in public. So I know this is not just unique to me. This is something that we humans feel when there's something wrong with our skin, with our outward appearance to the world. So once again, it's validation. It makes sense to me why this is all happening, why this came about at this very time when I opened the door to that room of my grief after my dad's suicide. And the self-compassion website, as always, had the information that I needed to reassure myself. First of all, it's okay if things do get worse. That doesn't mean we made a mistake or did anything wrong. That's part of the process. And they have a lot of encouragement for not judging and for remembering that this whole process of healing is about goodwill, but not necessarily good feelings. It may not always feel good to us, what we're going through, but the intention is for the good and toward the good. And no matter what, we're moving and growing in that direction, but we may go through rough patches when everything feels worse and when we feel like everything is just falling apart. So that was very reassuring to read. And I like the reminders to just take baby steps, to not try to push through things too quickly, and to also not get attached to the outcome, to remember that it's possible for things to get worse sometimes, and that's okay. That's a necessary step in this whole process of healing, and it's okay. So not be attached to making things get better and not being attached to how it all turns out, to allowing it to unfold however it does unfold. And that was such a good reminder for me, because this journey with shingles has been a little bit up and down. Some better days when I get excited, like, oh, great, it's going away, I'm so much better now. And then followed by a worse day when I think, oh no, it isn't actually better at all. I don't feel well today at all. But just remembering this is just the journey. These are the ups and downs of the journey. And I can't be attached either to getting better really quickly, or embarrassed about not getting better fast enough. I have to have equanimity in this process, and I have to just allow it to be whatever it is. And so the self-compassion practice, which I was reminded of again, consists of three things, three mantras really. The first saying, this is a moment of suffering for me. I'm suffering right now. Just acknowledging that. And without judgment or without attaching anything else to it, just acknowledging this is a time of suffering. The second is life consists of suffering. It's just part of life and how life is. So that helps normalize it so that I don't fall off the cliff in a way of feeling like this is disastrous, this shouldn't be, this shouldn't happen. No, this is just part of life. What I'm going through right now is part of how life works and how it unfolds. And then the third mantra is, may I be kind to myself. And of course, I love that. And it's a reminder that if we get into a judgmental state of mind about what we're going through, that's not showing kindness to ourselves. Kindness is to accept whatever is happening as it is and to still experience love, and to be able to be gentle with ourselves when we need that, to be able to listen to our bodies and what we're going through, and to rest when we need rest, and to perhaps have alone time or quiet time when we need that as well. So those three mantras, this is a moment of suffering, suffering is part of life, and may I be kind to myself. Those are really helping me right now, just those reminders going through my head each day as I wake up, not sure what the day will hold or how I'm going to feel on this particular day, but just allowing whatever is there to be there. That's really helping me a great deal. And another thought that I read on the Self-Compassion website is, even if a backdraft occurs and everything seems to be much worse for a while after opening the door, to remember kindness toward ourselves is always the right thing to do, and that perhaps it won't feel like being kind to myself is making any difference, but to think of it as planting seeds of kindness. So yes, we're in the midst of these horrific flames that are raging everywhere, but I'm still planting seeds of kindness, and they may not be able to grow right now while everything's burning, but I'm planting them for the future, because there will be a day when this settles down and when things truly do get better, and the kindness that I've shown myself now is going to pay off once we get past the backdraft and past the burning. And so today I'm talking to you from within the center of the flames in a way, and not necessarily with a lot of wisdom or answers or any conclusions. I'm talking to you from the midst of the backdraft, but I wanted to just share with you what I'm working on and what I've been doing. I have been using my journal every day as a place to just contemplate and look at what's happening. And I thought maybe I would share with you something that I wrote in my journal yesterday as I was thinking about this experience. First of all, releasing my grief at last and my guilt around my dad's death and talking about it publicly, showing it to everyone, and then developing shingles at the same time. So I'll read to you what I wrote in my journal to kind of give you an idea of where I am, because this says it in a way better than I'm able to tell you. I wrote this: shingles may be the cry of all the pain I've bottled up over the years, trying to ooze out through my pores. So I accept it. I embrace it. It is an outward manifestation of my pain, guilt, and shame. It is releasing itself and wreaking some havoc on the way. It won't go quietly. It will force me to attend to it, to listen, to feel it. I am bearing, B-E-A-R-I-N-G, and bearing, B-A-R-I-N-G, the stigma on my skin now. It cannot be hidden, only gradually released after I glean it for every thread of wisdom, every tingle of inspiration. This is good, true, and beautiful in its own way, and I cannot despair or reject it. I look on in awe. So amazing the way that life teaches, opens, softens, humbles. By grace I serve. By grace I am here. By grace I receive and give. And it is all grace. Every stab of pain, every fracture of the heart, every long night that feels unsurvivable. It is grace for sure, and I do not take it for granted. I am ever grateful for this body that can feel such pain and carry on. I embrace it with compassion and tolerance and presence. I abide. So I have been rereading that because those words that came through me in my journal inspire me and remind me that it's okay. I'm okay. I'm on this path. I'm on this journey. I'm accepting and experiencing whatever comes to me. And here I am opening the door again and sharing it with you. But now that I've opened up that hidden inner sanctum of all my grief and guilt, I feel like I'm not going to close it again. I'm not going to close those feelings off again. So here I am talking about it more in hopes that maybe there will be someone listening who is helped by it. And to be honest, I've received a lot of feedback about that podcast on my grief after my dad's suicide. Some from people who also have experienced suicide. I imagined that there would be people out there who would be touched by that episode. Others who are working with people who've experienced a suicide death. And so I'm so grateful for all the people who reached out to me to let me know that that episode resonated with them. And so maybe this episode on What Really Matters will resonate with someone as well. And that if you're going through a backdraft of sorts yourself, if it seems like everything just got a lot worse when you were trying to make it better, I hope that this will give you a little bit of comfort and a reminder to hang in there, be gentle and kind with yourself, and take it slowly. Have some equanimity. Don't get attached, and don't judge yourself if things seem worse instead of better. Just let it unfold with its own timing. And I hope that you can find grace and comfort and solace within your life wherever you are right now. So that's what I wanted to mention to you today on What Really Matters podcast. I do want to remind you that if you want to support this podcast or End of Life University, you can go to eoluniversity.com/support, and there you'll find 3 different ways you can make a financial contribution to help keep this podcast and End of Life University on the air. I also wanted to mention that I have some merchandise available to purchase, some mugs, t-shirts, hats. These are for End of Life University podcast, but I am in the process of making some for What Really Matters as well. And so I will leave a link to the page where that merchandise is available. It's on the eolupodcast.com website is where you can find the merchandise page. So I'll leave a link for that in the show notes for this episode if you're interested, and keep watching there, because I will come up with some What Really Matters merchandise as well in the near future, but perhaps when the backdraft is over, I'll get to work on that. So until next week, remember that we're here for love. So face your fear even in the midst of the backdraft. Be ready for whatever life brings you next, and love each and every moment of your very precious existence. Bye-bye.